Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Patty Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday night, or for our friend that I just saw watching from Australia, 11 a.m. in the morning. You'll have to let us know.
No, that's right. Thursday morning.
Yeah, but that
Somebody's
means
in the future.
I know, but that means it's time for Friends and Fiction. It's our favorite hour on the internet, and we are so excited to welcome Marie Benedict and Fiona Davis. I'm Christy Woodson Harvey.
I'm Patty Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristen Harmel.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support independent bookstores, authors, and libraries. Tonight, we're so excited to be talking with 3 of our favorite authors, Marie and Fiona now, and then don't miss our after show with Brenda Janowitz. And we have shared with you before that Mary Kay's daughter is sick, and so she is where she needs to be with her family tonight. So please join us in sending Mary Kay, her daughter Katie, and their family all our love and prayers as they navigate this territory.
And as you know, we continue to encourage you to support independent booksellers when and where you can. And one way to do that is to visit our own Friends and Fiction bookshop.org page, where you can find Marie's books and Fiona's books and our books and Brenda's book and all the books of all our guests that we've ever had. And a portion of each sale through the Friends and Fiction shop goes to support independent bookstores. And it also helps to support this show. In fact, in its first 2 years, bookshop.org has donated $21 million to support indies. Amazing.
Wow. Incredible. And don't forget that our spring box is now available for order from our friends at Oxford Exchange. If you order now, you will receive The Wedding Veil in March, Mary Kay's The Homewreckers in May, and a special Friends and Fiction notebook complete with sticky flags for marking all your favorite pages. Plus, Mary Kay and I are throwing in a little special treat to go with each one of our books that we can't wait for you to see.
Ooh, I'm excited. Even more excited about this box.
Surprises are good, right?
Surprises, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, sweetening the deal.
I know. I love it. All right. So all of you out there might remember we're in the second month of our very first Friends and Fiction reading challenge. So don't forget, you can keep track of what you're reading with our beautiful reading journal designed by us in conjunction with independent bookstore Oxford Exchange. And there's a great little picture of the journal. It has this gorgeous, as you can see, Friends and Fiction blue linen cover and plenty of space to record your thoughts on what you're reading. So our friend Anissa Armstrong shared on our Facebook page under announcements that this month's prompt is memoir or nonfiction. We talked, of course, last week about Alison Pataki's nonfiction book, which is fantastic, her memoir. And there are just so many wonderful books out there to enjoy. I'm actually rereading The Widow Clicquot right now for the second time. Yeah, which is such a good book. It's about the woman who founded Veuve Clicquot, the actual Veuve Clicquot. How about you?
We love her, and we don't know anything about her.
But
you know, she makes delicious.
We love her, and we don't even know who she is.
She was actually a phenomenal pioneer in the champagne industry way before women were doing that sort of thing. So it's just neat. I mean, that's the kind of thing you can fall into when you read memoirs or nonfiction books, right? So let us know in the Facebook group what you're reading too. We're excited to hear all about how you're meeting that reading challenge.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about Christie's The Wedding Veil. If you'll just let me talk about it for a minute, because it is out in fewer than 7 weeks, and I read it and I'm obsessed. And I'm telling you, you do not, for any reason, want to miss owning a signed first edition copy of this Christie's first hardcover. So many of you on the page hundreds, click, 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 have asked where you can get a first edition signed. So in addition to the Oxford Exchange box, Christie will have her very first The Wedding Veil event on Pub Day on March 29th at one of our very favorite indies, M. Judson Bookstore in Greenville, South Carolina. And they will be taking personalization requests, and each signed copy comes with this little vial of rosebud tea. And
That's
you
so
can
cute.
find all the glorious and glittering details on her website.
Thank you.
And can I just add, A, I've read it, it's amazing. And B, for all of you who tune in, like this is a great, how do I even put it? This isn't in our script. I'm just saying Christie pours her like heart and soul and everything into this show week after week. And it's just a nice way to thank her by buying it or pre-ordering it or buying it the first week. If this is a show that you enjoy watching, it's a good deed to do for someone who shows up for us all the time.
Yep.
Aww,
Plus, it's
y'all.
an amazing
Thank
book.
you.
So why would you not?
Thank you.
It's so
Thank
good.
you.
And
Y'all are
mostly-
the best. They're so good to me. They both blurbed it. I mean, can you imagine if they said no? Show would be very awkward.
The show would fall apart.
But thank you for all that you've done.
Exactly.
You've been so supportive, and
It's
I'm
a
very
great book.
appreciative.
It's a great
And
book.
and
We
to
love
all
it.
of you
Buy
out
her
there
book,
too.
damn it.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's
Hashtag buy her book
Yeah.
tip.
That's our cat.
Well, let's welcome our guests for the evening. While practicing as a New York City lawyer, Marie Benedict dreamed of a job where she could uncover the hidden historical stories of women, and she discovered it once she tried her hand at writing.
Her novels tell the tales of fascinating women from the past. She recently wrote the huge New York Times bestseller, The Mystery of Mrs Christie, which focuses on the real-life disappearance of Agatha Christie and how it shaped her into the world's most successful novelist. For her first co-written novel, Marie teamed up with Victoria Christopher Murray for, I think almost everyone on our page has read and talked about this book with great love, The Personal Librarian, which was a New York Times bestseller and a Good Morning America pick. Her new novel, which is brilliant, y'all, is Her Hidden Genius, which was just released last month and follows the British scientist Rosalind Franklin, who worked to discover the structure of DNA. Nurse Patty is geeking out on this. And she had her research taken by James Watson and Francis Crick, which are the names you learned in school, but you didn't learn Rosalind's name.
Yeah.
So it's an astounding book.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig in with her about that tonight. It's going to be so interesting to hear the story behind this story.
I know.
Yeah. Our second guest tonight, Fiona Davis, in addition to being an additional blurber of Christie's The Wedding Veil. I believe it has her wonderful quote on the front. Like, it's amazing. I know she had such kind things to say about it. But in addition to that, she is also the New York Times bestselling author of 6 historical fiction novels set in iconic New York City buildings, including The Dollhouse, The Address, and The Lions of Fifth Avenue, which was a Good Morning America book club pick. Her novels have been translated into over a dozen languages, and her articles have appeared in publications ranging from the Wall Street Journal to O, the Oprah magazine.
I don't think we have to say what O is. I'm thinking.
That is true.
Well, maybe not.
I'm just going to launch a magazine called K. Does that work?
Well, maybe we could do
we can
it
do
together.
it together.
Yes.
They wouldn't
We need another project.
Can it be the KP?
It could be the KP.
KPM? KPM.
Sure.
Okay.
Fiona is based in New York City. Although she first came to New York as an actress, Fiona fell in love with writing after getting a master's degree at Columbia Journalism School. Her new novel, The Magnolia Palace, was just released last month and follows the secrets, betrayal, and murder within one of New York City's Gilded Age mansions. And let me tell you, I could not put this one down. It was absolutely, both of these books are just terrific. And we're so lucky to have these amazing guests. So Sean, will you bring them on?
Hi, y'all.
Hi, ladies.
Oh my gosh, I was laughing backstage at you guys. We're so
Wait, at us or with us? We're confused.
tiny bit at you, but definitely with you.
Okay, good.
Well, KPM magazine. That's
Yes.
I would
subscribe.
I would
Stay
subscribe.
tuned. Stay tuned.
You guys, we have our first 2 subscribers.
We have 2 subscriptions.
That's all you need. Get going.
That's all you need to get going. That's right. Well, welcome to our first 2 subscribers, Marie and Fiona. We are so glad to have you here. And as I said, we loved both of these beautiful novels about the most fascinating women. And we're so excited to talk to you about them. So before we get started, or I guess to get started, could you tell us a little bit about your beautiful new books? Marie, do you want to start us out?
Sure. Well, P, aka Patty, kind of stole thunder a little bit, but it is about the
I'm
brilliant.
just going to call her P from now on.
Sorry.
Oh, no, please don't.
Please.
I have had a lot of nicknames, and I don't want that one.
I like Party Patty the best. That's the one that's
Party
sticking for
Patty.
me.
Party
Mhm.
Patty.
Is that one of them? That's a choice? Okay.
Yes,
Awesome.
yeah, Isn't that good? I know.
We
I know.
embrace that choice. Sorry.
On to a much more somber topic. For Rosalind Franklin, the heroine of my new book, Her Hidden Genius, is, as Patty said, this brilliant chemist who becomes, through her diligent efforts, uncovers the double helix structure of DNA. But without her permission and without her knowledge, her colleague, Morris Wilkins, who is very, very jealous of the work that she's doing, shares her work with 2 gentlemen who you probably do know, Francis Crick and James Watson. And within 6 weeks of getting their hands on her research that took her years to do, they created a model of DNA and wrote a paper for which they won the Nobel Prize. It's unbelievably suspenseful, even though it's about science. It's a story about love and loss, and most of all, about this incredible woman who we should all know, because she really is responsible for modern day genetics in many ways, and most people don't know her name.
Wow. Incredible. Fiona, how about you? Can you tell us about Magnolia Palace?
Yeah, sure. So the Magnolia Palace is set at the Frick Collection, which is a gorgeous museum in New York City that was the home of Henry Clay Frick and his family. I love that we have a Frick and a Crick.
Yes, it's interesting.
And I love that if you say either one of those wrong, we'd get bleeped out. So.
Oh no. Oh no. All right. So I set my books in 2 timelines. And so in 1919, it's from the point of view of a very celebrated artist's model named Lillian, who gets caught up in a scandal. And to kind of hide out, she takes a job working incognito as the private secretary to Helen Frick, who's a very prickly, temperamental woman, and the adult daughter of Henry Frick, who was an industrialist and an art collector. And she gets very caught up in the family drama. There's romantic trysts, betrayal, a stolen pink diamond known as the Magnolia Diamond, and lots of crazy plot twists. And then in 1966, it's from the point of view of a fashion model named Veronica. And she's come to the Frick, what's now the museum, to do a Vogue photo shoot, and that goes terribly wrong. And she gets stuck inside during a 3-day blizzard, along with an intern named Joshua. And she stumbles upon a series of hidden messages that are hidden within the artwork on the walls. And that leads her and Joshua on this scavenger hunt, and that she hopes might solve all of her financial problems, as well as possibly solve a murder that happened in the Frick household decades earlier.
So good.
That's a great description. Yeah.
Okay, so both of you, I know firsthand what it's like to become so invested in, maybe infatuated with a woman's life that you feel compelled to tell their story. Whether someone says, that's a great idea or not, you have to tell this woman's story. And for me, the idea to write about Joy Davidman struck years before I actually sat down to write the story. So you both took on the task of portraying real life women, Fiona and Helen Frick and Marie Rosalind Franklin. Can you tell us or talk to us a bit about what was the first spark for this story? What was the first spark that made you say, I want to write about her? Marie, you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, I keep this like crazy long list of historical women that I want to write about. I mean,
Oh.
I like my Santa Claus list,
Yeah.
and I hope I get to work my way through them all one day. But Rosalind was on it for a long time. She's been on it for years. She kind of always sort of hovered around the periphery of my sort of potential women I wanted to write about. But I wasn't sure about the real depth of her story, right? I knew that she was a scientist. She had been overshadowed or marginalized in some ways in terms of the DNA discovery. But in terms of her life, I wasn't sure. And a very dear friend of mine who is an ER doctor, and she's really a hero in her own right. She led the Red Cross efforts during 9/11. She was a first responder. She read this book called The Gene, which is nonfiction. And there's a section on Rosalind. And she called me and she said, okay, I don't know what is on your plate next, but you have to write about Rosalind Franklin. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure her life is suspenseful or interesting enough. And she's like, oh, it is. She said she made the ultimate sacrifice for her discoveries. And she said she did so much after she discovered DNA. She made these unbelievable discoveries, which are really the foundational work for RNA and viruses and all this other stuff. This is before COVID. And so I dug in and I found out that her life was actually hugely interesting and her legacy much faster than I could have ever imagined. But it wasn't until I was actually writing it during COVID that I realized that so much of our understanding of COVID and our creation of the viruses, which has been really very much a female scientist-led effort across companies and universities, a lot of Rosalind's work is foundational to that. And I mean, it was just sort of the timing came together. And I was so thankful I had listened to my friend, because if I hadn't, she might have still been on that list, and I wouldn't have been able to celebrate her in the really timely way.
At the right time.
Yeah.
I remember when I saw it and I told you that I had briefly, for 2 seconds, met Jennifer Dounda, who is responsible for, working on Rosalind's work and then taking it even further for splicing. And I can geek out on it. I just think it's amazing. I'm so glad you decided to write about her. So, all right, Fiona, what was your first real spark for this?
So I started looking into the Frick family, and basically they lived in this huge mansion on Fifth Avenue. Enormous. There's a bowling alley in the basement. That's how big it is. And it was a family of 3 served by a staff of 27.
Oh,
and
wow.
They lived there from 1914 on. And, you think, oh, this daughter, Helen, she must have been very coddled and that kind of thing and spoiled. But she was an interesting woman, and she had so much depth and so many contradictions. And I think that's what drew me to her. She was her father's confidant. They were very, very close in terms of the art collecting and that kind of thing. But she was also pretty prickly, and they had a difficult relationship, I'd say. Mm-hmm. And so things like, she hated anyone with a German last name. She wouldn't let them on her property or, work anywhere near her. If any of her friends got a bob haircut, which of course was very big in the 1920s, she would unfriend them. And because she wore a pompadour and a bun most of her entire adult life. She just was, she was a really kind of dug-in woman. But at the same time, in World War I, during 1917, at the worst of the war, she created a Red Cross unit and took it to France to help refugees. And that was an incredibly brave thing to do. And when she came back, she was really almost traumatized by it, to the point where her father talked about how when she went through Grand Central, she had to walk along the perimeter. She couldn't walk through the Grand Concourse. It was too exposed. And I think that kind of thing really affected her. And then she went on to create the Frick Art Reference Library, which is, right next door to the Frick, and this celebrated top of the line art reference library, the best in the world. And that's where she put her passion. She didn't have kids. She didn't get married. And she was just this interesting woman who was not necessarily likable, but I kind of like that about her.
Yeah. When I talk about Joy Davidman and people say, I didn't like her very much, I'm like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to. What she was complicated and interesting, just like you're a woman, Fiona.
So
the complicated and interesting is better than likable and boring. So.
And what's fun is I found so many readers reach out to me and tell me that she's their favorite character.
Wow.
And I think it's because she just is unapologetically herself.
She has that like piece of her that we all kind of secretly wish we had, you know, where you're just like, I don't care. I'm going to say exactly what I think about this. And like how freeing that must be.
Yes.
And especially at a time in history where that wasn't the norm,
gosh.
you know, I mean, yeah, that's incredible.
You were not supposed to stand in your own power and say,
No,
I want this. I like that. It just
absolutely
wasn't.
not.
So
Yeah.
fascinating.
And
I think, yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have Helen on my list because Helen Frick, she's on my list.
Wow.
I spent a huge amount of time. She's from Pittsburgh, and she lived in Pittsburgh until she was a teenager. And the house that she lived in is now like a house museum in a very small scale compared to the Frick collection. And when I was writing Carnegie's Maid, I spent a huge amount of time in her personal papers. And she circled back to the house at the very end of her life. That's where she died. And I met with and spent a lot of time with the people who were her caretakers at that time.
Wow.
So I learned all this crazy stuff about her. And she was on my list because I thought, what an unusual, striking, complicated woman who really carved her own path at a time when that was just simply not done, right? I mean, her job was supposed to be to get married and, you know, establish another mansion in Newport or something, right? But she did something totally different. She's amazing. I love her.
Oh,
I
look at you
love
too.
I love this crossover because it's so interesting because I actually think we both interviewed Colin Bailey for our
Yes.
book because he's the director of the Morgan and he used to be a curator at the Frick.
That's
Oh
right.
my gosh.
So much crossover. It's kind of wonderful.
Oh,
it's-
that's awesome.
Frick is one of my favorite places. And in fact, the Fricks, there's a whole scene in Personal Librarian where the Fricks buy paintings that were once owned by the Morgan, and then they become that beautiful room at the Frick, which if you haven't seen, you have to go see. I mean, it's just stunning.
Oh my God. I love these
I
points
love
in
this tie.
common. This is awesome.
Great.
No, we knew. That's
Yeah.
why.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes.
Probably brought
Yeah.
one here together.
This was
Mhm.
deliberate. We're geniuses. That's why our magazine's gonna fly off the shelves. Just so you know.
This is our hidden genius.
Yes. We invited you here to tell you that. Yes. So, you know,
Our hidden gems.
so as you were both talking about these women at the center of your novels, I was thinking about how you both do so much, not just with these books, but with other books too, to bring these complicated women, specifically women from the past who were not necessarily recognized for their contributions to society, to bring them back to the forefront. So Marie, of course, in the case of Rosalind Franklin, you know, her DNA research was groundbreaking. Fiona, in your case, your fictional Angelica, I believe was based on the model whose figure was the inspiration for some of the most famous statues that still kind of, you know, wow us today, but you know, you never hear her name. That's something that's not common knowledge. So you two, you know, you've both been kind enough to blur my books. I know you completely, you know, that I also know how important it is to bring these forgotten pieces of the past back to the forefront. And I think that's such an interesting thing, both in writing stories like that and in reading stories like that. So at the end of my long question, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I was wondering, do you think that and this is going to be a question to both of you. Do you think that you feel a special calling to make sure that these women are remembered in history? Or do you think that recognition that they now get in your books is sort of a byproduct of a story too good to pass up? You know, a story that's just demanding to be told. So kind of what's the impetus? Is it wanting to tell these women's stories and restore their place? Or is it they were so fascinating, so their stories are interesting? Fiona, how about you?
Yeah, it's such a good question. As I'm doing my research, I always, in every book, have come across a woman who's really been lost to history, possibly overshadowed by men, the way that Angelica or Lillian in the book, that's her kind of stage name. But her real name was Audrey Munson. And she was this incredible artist's muse, and her statues can be found all over New York City. And, you know, she went on to lead this incredible life. But then in the end, and this is different from the book, which is why I renamed her, she ended up in an asylum where she died in 1996 at the age of 104. And
Wow.
it's so shocking that we don't know her name, that we walk by statues at Columbus Circle, in front of the Plaza Hotel, the New York Public Library, the Brooklyn Museum. She's everywhere in New York, and we know the special names, but we don't know her name. And I think what happens is I find these women, and the reason I found her was that her figure is carved into the pediment above the entrance to the Frick. And that's where I first heard of Audrey Munson. That's the connection to the building. And whenever I read something like that, I think, okay, I want to shout this from the rooftops. How do people not know this woman? For example, in the masterpiece, there's an illustrator who a character is based on who existed in real life. And I read her story and thought, why don't we know her name?
Yes.
And so many of these women end up having really hard times because they're just not, considered important. And so I think by writing this story and shouting it to the rooftops, Audrey Munson, go look who she is, go check her out. Right. And drawing people to her, it kind of fulfills that need to share it with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Marie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of the two, but I really am very mission driven. I really feel this very specific mission to honor these women, to bring them out, really from the detritus of the past where they've been hidden or buried by somebody in the case, and really shine the light on them. But, I'm looking for specific things in the woman. I'm looking for a woman whose legacy is very tangible, something we can really get our hands around, which is, I think, kind of why I end up writing about a scientist a lot, because their legacies are so clear. And so we can see the way that their work has played out over time. And I'm also looking for women who are really grappling with modern day issues, whether it's, the marginalization of scientists or, work-life balance, or the way in which women can or can't use their political voices. But at the end of the day, even though I'm very mission driven in terms of who makes it on my list, whether they meet the rubric or not, I think that it has to be a good story. I think Rosalind Franklin is a really clear case in point. She was on my list. I knew she had all the right elements. She met the rubric, but was her story going to be compelling enough? Was it going to draw people in? Because if it doesn't, it's lost the purpose. The purpose of what I'm doing is to really bring them to life, to give them that second chance at life that they didn't have the first time around. And so with Rosalind, I wasn't sure, but when I dug into it and I saw this sometimes prickly, brilliant, sometimes off-putting, but could also be super charming and loving, was a woman who'd had love affairs and a wonderful family life, and was so much more than the one-dimensional scientist that she'd been made out to be by James Watson. So, and to me also that sort of idea of how a woman becomes an icon or not is very much a part of the process of the book as well. And it was an idea I wanted to explore. So for me, it's really a combination of things, but very, very mission driven to start.
That completely makes sense. And all five of us here have, I think, been writing for years. We've been doing this for a while. Do you think we're at a moment in history where the doors are opening for us to be able to do that? I mean, that's what it feels like to me, that these stories that maybe even 10 years ago wouldn't have been received the same way. I don't know. We're just sort of at a special moment in time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would. Like something like the Queen's Gambit, the success, right? Where it's this woman who no one knew her name, and now it's out there. I think there's an appetite for it, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think people are thirsting for those stories, but they didn't even know that they were thirsting for them until they tried them. And now that they have, they want more of it. They want to look back in the past and see these women where they've been all along, hiding in plain sight, So I think that really has fueled that along. But I agree with you too, Kristen. I think maybe that appetite wasn't there before. The book that put me on this path is The Myths of Avalon, which I talk about a lot, but which is a a retelling of the Arthurian legend from the point of view of the women. And I read that when I was like in middle school, and there was like nothing like that at that time.
Yes.
And that book really put me on the path that I'm on today, although it took me way too long to figure that out. But that book was like the only one of its kind for so long.
Yes.
And I think that there's a little bit of that, people thirsting for it and then finding it, and then wanting more of it. I hope anyway, because that's what I do.
Yeah. That's what we're
Yeah,
working
for
on.
sure.
Exactly.
I think that's your mission. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Well, Marie, Patty's already been super stingy with her praise about how much she loves the sciencey parts of your book.
She hasn't mentioned it to us at
sorry.
all. Yeah.
Zipping it.
No, stingy
Yeah.
with her praise. But I am also kind of a science nerd, and actually did science writing in college, and kind of thought that was going to be like yes, I love science. And so the science nerd in me really loved the science parts of her hidden genius and found them so fascinating. But I'm just the whole time I was reading, I guess as writers, we just read in a different way. I was thinking, how is she doing this research? Because not only were you having to do this massive amount of scientific research, but you're having to do a massive amount of scientific research from the 1940s. So it's not like you're going to a scientist and saying, explain to me how you would find this, how it would be uncovered, and how it would work. Like, you are recreating these processes that haven't probably gone on in a while for the most part. So how did you go about finding this information?
Wow, that's like, how long do you have?
It's got a while.
That's a really long time. I mean, I don't know what I think I'm doing. I'm nobody's scientist. I go where the women lead. If it's science, I follow them. If it's politics, I go there. If it's, Czechoslovakia or England, I'll go wherever they go, and I have to figure it out as I go along. I think in this particular book, I did have to go back. And I think one of the things I was so fortunate is, all of us love that original source material, right? We love the letters and the journals, the stuff that's like brings the person to life. Mm-hmm. And in response to James Watson wrote an absolutely incendiary autobiography about the creation of DNA, in, I think it was 1968, long after all this happened. And Rosalind's really good friend, Anne Sayre, who was married to a microbiologist who was friends with Rosalind, was outraged at her portrayal in there. She was like the stereotypical dark, stingy, very difficult scientist who didn't want to help anybody, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to be an assistant to you. I apologize. But anyway, so Anne Sayre got so incensed by this biography. She spent 2 or 3 years researching exactly what happened, interviewing everybody, collecting all of Rosalind's documents, and she wrote her own biography about what happened, which is awesome. I mean, everybody should read this. So be a masterpiece of writing, really. But here's the amazing part. She saved everything and gave it to the American Society for Microbiology Library. And during COVID, this most amazing librarian copied it all for me. So not only did I have like all these letters, all these family interviews, all these interviews of every single person who was involved in the 1960s and 70s while they were still alive, there's also so much about how the process, how it happened, what her friend really thought of in terms of he said, she said, like what happened with the taking of information. So while I did have to kind of go back into scientific history of science books and kind of learn the science from a historical standpoint. And I was fortunate. I have a good friend who is a PhD in chemistry from Princeton and helped guide me along the way. I mean, she couldn't, really tell me about certain historic things, but she could verify that I was on the right track. So with good research, good people, and this amazing sort of treasure trove of information from Anne Sayre, I was able to kind of piece it together. And that also really brought Rosalind alive for me, which was an immense gift.
That's awesome.
So cool.
Marie, can I just ask a quick question that I know the answer to, having read the book, but I just want to clarify. I'm not a science geek. You don't need to be a science geek to like this book, right? It's the story of a woman, right? It's the story of this woman who just happens to be a scientist. Like that, you don't have to go into it loving science, correct?
No, I mean, I definitely think that if I can write this book, anyone can read this book. Because I explain it in a way that, because basically I was processing all this information and boiling it down in a very understandable fashion for myself.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in order to translate it in a book, it had to be accessible to me. And in that, given that I'm not a scientist and I'm not a science geek, I know that anyone could read it and understand it. I mean, I think I had to learn the science because it's important to the suspense, because there was a race.
Yeah.
There was a race to discover DNA.
Absolutely.
And you have to understand why certain people won and how certain people lost and what happened.
Absolutely.
So that's the part that that's the only reason you really need to know that part of it.
And I think she has such a rich, complicated life too, like just beyond all of that in her personal story. But I think also, highlighting kind of that race part of it, you're feeling her, it's like a universal feeling. And like the kind of the times that she's putting herself in positions that are damaging to herself, that she probably should not be doing because she wants it so much, and I think it's something that science or no science, whatever it is, we've all kind of felt that feeling.
Women trying
really
to get to the finish line in ways without being run over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think what's even more remarkable in some ways about Rosalind is she was doing it for all the right reasons. Yeah. She wasn't doing it for the race. She wasn't doing it for the Nobel Prize. She was doing it for humanity. Yes. And her, that's really such a legacy of her family. They were true altruists. And I, just in the past week, 2 weeks, I have become very friendly with her family. In fact, her niece, Rosalind Franklin, and I have spent a lot of time together, and I've been it's been unbelievable how warm and welcoming and kind they've been about the book, but also it's given me so many insights into their family overall, and how Rosalind was so unique in that this was her form of familial altruism. And the race wasn't the same kind of race for her as it was for other people.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, Fiona, we know that you have made a really fabulous and completely fascinating career by finding notable New York City buildings and then telling their stories through the people. Your buildings don't talk to us. Well, they kind of do. I'm also someone who believes that every place and the treasures inside of it tell a story. So the idea of using not only the Frick, which is a favorite museum in New York, but also the incredible works of art inside to tell a story is so fascinating. So I have kind of a double-edged question. Why the Frick, which could be, makes me laugh. Why the Frick did you do that? Why the Frick? And how did you do the incredibly detailed research about the paintings? I want to hear a lot about this.
Yeah, I'll frickin' tell you.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Had to do it. I love the Frick. I think if you ask any New Yorker what's their favorite building, their favorite museum, they tend to say the Frick. And it's not like the Met or the Guggenheim, which are these huge, monster museums. It's smaller. It's 3 stories. It's set back from Fifth Avenue. And the reason I was really drawn to it was the fact that it was a residence and then a museum. And so when you're working into 2 timelines, that works really well because you can show how the building and the people within it have changed over time. And it was wonderful working with them in, the Frick organization in terms of the research. It was during lockdown. And so I got this amazing behind the scenes tour in January of 2020. And then New York City locked down in March. But luckily on frick.org, they have this incredible floor plan with a 360-degree view in every room. And so you can just plop right into whatever room you need, look around. So if I was, working in the library and say, all right, what's the painting above the fireplace? I could go into that, and then you click on the painting and it tells you all about it.
Oh, wow.
And so, and I highly recommend people go check it out because it's such a beautiful, every room is so spectacular. And then on top of that, I needed to know more about life as the family lived it in the 1910s. And so there they have digital archives that they were able to share with me of, dinner party menus from 1915 for a dinner party for 30 and all of the 7 courses that were served. or the payroll, which showed all of the staff, how much they got paid, what their names were, what they did. And that was just, that really made it manageable, even though it was during 2020. And also they do this amazing thing, Cocktails with a Curator, during COVID, every Friday at 5, where they would have a 10-15 minute video of a curator drinking a cocktail and talking about one painting.
Wow.
And I highly recommend you check that out too.
Oh, I want to go to that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun. They're all online. And so, I could really kind of embed myself in whatever painting I needed to really, really do a deep dive about.
Awesome.
And it was a matter with the scavenger hunt of finding paintings that reflected what the characters were as well. So Veronica's a model, and she's looking at a painting, and who was that woman who sat for that painting in the 1800s? What was her story? And kind of going down that road, because I wanted it to be fun. I didn't want to hit people over the head with the art history.
Mm-hmm.
I took a class, art history, in college, pass fail, and I passed. So I thought, hey, I should write a book about art. Not like Marie.
Because of that P.
Like me with science.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. And so but by making it a scavenger hunt, and the clues being really bad poetry, which was a lot of fun.
I loved that.
Because they're all just horrendous poetry. and so by making kind of fun in that way, I hope it brings the collection to life in a way that even though you're reading it, you're not looking at it, you feel like you understand what it was all about and what the Fricks accomplished.
Yeah.
Well, we have got so many questions we could ask you questions all night. We have so many questions flying in for you guys from the audience. So, Kristen, will you pull a live question for us, please?
Yeah, we actually have a great one from Amy Sparkman. I'm so interested to hear the answer. She wants to know, for both of you, how has your writing changed from your first book to your most recent? Which I think is
I want to know too.
Because I think, I've read both of you for a while, so it's just interesting. Marie, do you want to start?
Sure. Gosh, I think I'd have to go back to my first book, which I wrote under a different name, still the same themes, other pieces of history. I wrote a few books that were historical suspense, and then I did 2 YA books before I wrote these books. And I feel like my writing has changed so much because I feel like in some ways those books were writing exercises to get me to where I was supposed to go. Like the first books, I learned that I didn't love the modern day storylines. What I loved was the historic storylines. And then with YA, I learned that I love to write in the first person, because those YA books, they love to keep it very emotional and very real. And I knew I was getting closer and closer to really narrowing into just women's histories, but bringing all those things together and telling their stories in the first person from a really intimate standpoint was really, it was a path. Then I had to go through all of those sort of iterations to get to where it was supposed to be.
That.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. That completely makes sense. How about you, Fiona?
Yeah, because I write in 2 timelines and there's an element of mystery that drives the story forward and plot twists, I've always really outlined each timeline very carefully before I even start that first draft. Because I need a guidepost. I need to know where I'm going. I need to make sure a plot twist doesn't screw up the story in the other timeline of giving away something too early. And so I've always done that. But I think as I've done the later books, I'm more open to letting the characters do what they need to do as I'm writing a scene. And sometimes they don't behave. They don't follow that outline. And I've learned that that's okay. And just to let them go their way, and you'll figure it out in the end. And usually when that happens, that's the right decision. That's the right way to go. I don't know if you guys have discovered that as well. Yeah.
100%. Yes,
sure.
Very good point.
Definitely. You have to leave that room for them to take you where they want to take you.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, there's a great question here from Carrie Soderman. And it's actually, I'm glad she asked it because I was thinking about it when I was talking to you, Marie, and you might not even know, but has the Nobel Prize Committee ever talked about going back and recognizing women whose work was claimed by men? Have they ever talked about retro Nobel Prizes? Has that even come up?
I it definitely has been talked about in general. Now, whether the Nobel Committee has agreed to do that is a different matter. But what I will say is that at the time, I had to learn a little bit about how the Nobel process works, which I didn't know, just to understand why Rosalind did or didn't get it. And they have always maintained she didn't get it because they don't give, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but they don't give Nobels posthumously, and they don't give it to more than 3 people. So that's the way that they describe it away. But if you look at the records of how it was actually decided who would get it in this case, because it was Watson Crick and Rosalind's terrible colleague, Morris Wilkins, they have a private investigation done of the entire during the process. And the private investigator said, I don't know why this isn't being given to Rosalind Franklin. It seems to me that she would have been the one to get it rather than Morris Wilkins. So that's like the independent person saying, wait a second, so it's interesting to me that, someone who's really close to all that information right at the time, really knew that she deserved it. And yet these sort of arbitrary rules were set up to prevent her from getting it. I don't think they'll go back and revisit it because they would have to go back and revisit.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. True. Okay, Fiona, super briefly, I have to ask this because it just popped up and I think this is so great. Terry Stafford Stokes wants to know if you take your house guests on personal New York tours of the places that you've written about. And
because we want to be your house guest.
We be your house guest?
Yeah, that's the other question.
That's the actual real question.
We publish a magazine, Fiona. We don't want to, we're pretty important.
Yeah, no, I get it. We'll rent a limo for that one.
Oh, good. Phew. We're treated appropriately.
What's the funniest thing is ever since I think even the first book, there's a book club in Boston called Club Red, R-E-D, and it stands for Reading, Eating, and Drinking. And, they're an amazing bunch. And every year they have rented a bus, and about 30 of them come down and tour the locations of whatever book that is. And I'll join them for lunch. And it's just really wonderful. I'm just so impressed with them. I have to give a shout out to Club Red. It's
awesome.
That's incredible.
That's so cool. You notice how she like sort of sidestepped whether she was going to take us. I mean, the
really
limo did come up.
She didn't essentially offer.
She didn't give us a definite yes, did she?
Right.
Well, name the date. I'll get the limo. We'll be set. We will be so set. I promise.
Well, Chrissy, do you want to ask more live ones or?
No, I'm sorry. Let's move on to the writing tip.
Okay. So Marie and Fiona, one of our favorite parts of the night is for us and for the watchers, the viewers, is to ask y'all for a good writing tip. It is always so fascinating to hear, no matter how many authors we talk to, that they have such different perspectives on writing. So Marie, you want to go first?
For me, I think the most important thing has been throughout this whole process, going from a lawyer to becoming a writer, kind of working my way through the books to find really what I think I'm meant to do. It's been following what I'm really passionate about. You always hear the tip, write what you know. Well, if that were the case, none of us would be writing anything historical because, we weren't there. But I do think writing what you're passionate about, whether you know it or not, right? I think that has always been sort of a guiding post for me. For me, it's about circling back to what I was really passionate about when I was, in middle school, early high school, before society told me who I should be. And I often find that when people are thinking they want to write, but they don't know what to focus on, focusing on who you were then or what you were passionate about at your most sort of early self is an interesting exercise. But I say follow what you're passionate about, not necessarily what you know. Otherwise, I would definitely not be writing this book.
Right.
That's awesome. How about you, Fiona?
Yeah, I never imagined I would write a book. I thought that was what other people did. There was no way I could imagine writing, 100,000 words. And it wasn't until I was in my late 40s and really felt like I had something to say. And this kind of ties in with what Marie's talking about. It wasn't until I've kind of gone out and lived life and suffered and celebrated and done all these things that I had something to say. And so my advice would be, don't rush it. Don't feel like if you don't write your book by the time you're 30, it's all over. There's plenty of time to get experience and go out and live. And then once you're ready, you'll know it's time, and then just leap into it. I've changed careers every 10 years, and I highly recommend it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Interesting life.
And that's so true. I feel like so many of us couldn't write what we write without having lived.
No,
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, that's such a big part of it. Absolutely. Okay, quick question for both of you. I know you're both you're both so generous about reading work by other authors, by giving support to those authors. Is there anything quickly you can shout out that's coming down the pipeline in the next couple of months that you've gotten an early glimpse of that you want to recommend to our viewers out there?
Yeah, I'll go first if you want, Marie.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Yeah, I happen to have it right here because I just finished it. It's The Foundling by Anne Leary.
Oh, she's
Foundling. It's historical fiction, and it's based on a true women's asylum that was in America in the 1920s, where they put what they called feeble-minded women of childbearing age.
Oh.
And it was basically a place where if you didn't like your wife, you could toss her in there. And it's an incredible story. It's fictional characters, fictional place, but based on fact. And the ending is one of the best endings I've read in a long time. I
can't wait.
It comes out in looks like May 31st.
Awesome.
Ooh, I'm excited. Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
I just have to say, it reminds me of a nonfiction. Back to your nonfiction list.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Kate Moore, nonfiction, called The Women They Could Not Silence. And it's about the historical practice of putting not necessarily feeble-minded, but objectionable women in asylums. Women who would not do what was society expected, or maybe were in contravention of what their husband wanted or their father. And it's I mean, I don't know exactly the topic of this book, but it sounds really dovetails with that, and would be a really interesting nonfiction comparison, because that is crazy. Oh my gosh.
I'd like that title for your next book, Marie. Objectionable Women.
Yes.
You just said objectionable women, and it was like,
Awesome.
Well, I think, I think I'd be a proud objectionable woman.
I would like to do
Yes.
That could be the magazine title, actually.
Yes. Fiona nailed it.
Perfect. That is perfect. Well, Marie and Fiona, I think it's safe to say you have earned a spot on the board of our new magazine. And if you wouldn't mind sticking around for a few more minutes, we have one additional question for you. But first, a few reminders from us.
Don't forget about our Writer's Block podcasts. It is every single Friday, and it's different than this show. We will always post links under announcements each time a new one goes out. Last week, Ron and Mary Kay talked with Linda Ketron from the Litchfield Luncheon series about people who are author allies. And we all know that we wouldn't be here without them. And this week, Ron and Christy talked to Robert Degoni. And I know y'all are going to freak the frick building out because that book is posted about more times on our page. And they talk about the staying power of stories. And we know you will love to listen to this one. He is the author of The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hill. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're hitting those little subscribe buttons, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter and our YouTube channel so you never miss anything. And sometimes if you want to watch some back episodes, you can go to the new streaming platform called Loco Plus, which includes lots of brand new content from other independent creators like us.
Yeah, we love them. We're happy to be on their platform.
Yeah.
All right. So we tell you this every week, but you guys, if you have not joined the Friends in Fiction official book club yet, what are you waiting for? Of course, the group is separate from us. Brenda Gardner and Lisa Harrison run the group. They have more than 10,000 members. They have amazing behind the scenes book chats. They have special happy hours with Ron Block, just all sorts of amazing things, including a read of The Wedding Date Date by Jasmine Guillory, who was our guest, I think last summer or the summer before.
Last
The
summer.
years are flying by now. But she's coming on February 17th to discuss that book. And, she's wonderful. She's going to do just a great job with them. We encourage you to join. So the Friends in Fiction Official Book Club.
And make sure to join us for our next episode of Friends in Fiction next Wednesday, right here at 7 p.m., where we will welcome Jane Allen of the Black Girls Must Be Magic series. Then on February 23rd, we host V.E. Schwab and Greer McAllister. Oh, is her new book?
It's GR.
I was like, is that a typo? GR McAllister for her new book will join for the after show. If you are ever wondering about our schedule, it is always on the Friends in Fiction website and on the header graphic on our Facebook page. And so, ladies, before you go, we have one last question for you. And this could be a hard one, although Marie kind of mentioned it, so maybe we'll let her go first. But what is the book that changed you the most as a writer?
Well, I already
kind of mentioned
it. Yeah. I would definitely say The Myths of Avalon. I mean, it's an old book. It's a fantasy novel. It's from, I don't even know when, but my precious aunt, who really set me on my life's path way back when, gave it to me as a present. And it was just that retelling of something so familiar from the perspective of the woman that opened up my eyes to the fact that there were all these women's stories and women's perspectives and women's histories out there, and they were not being told. And how could we even understand our history with just one perspective? And so it really led me down the path of asking that question, how history is formed, and really to look, in this case, for the women and for the voices that aren't heard. So that book did it for me. I don't think that was the intention of that book, but that was definitely the result of that experience.
Cool.
That's awesome.
What about you, Fiona?
Yeah, I would have to say The People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks.
Oh,
It's such a good book. And it's about a sacred Jewish text that travels through centuries. And that, I think, taught me, how you could leap through time, but still tell a cohesive story, and one that's full of interesting characters, and kind of compare and contrast how people's voices and agency have changed over time and how they haven't. And so that would be it for me. That sent me on my historical fiction rampage.
I love hearing
that.
Yeah.
so cool.
I love that. I can see just the continuity of that into what you did, and you took it and made it your very own.
Buildings. Yeah, I took a building instead of a book.
That's awesome. I love that.
Fascinating. I love that. Well, ladies, you have been such incredible guests. I know everyone in our group loves you guys, and they always want to hear from you and about your new books. And so we are so grateful that you spent your Wednesday night with us. We love the books. And everyone, if you have not read Her Hidden Genius and the Magnolia Palace, run, don't walk to get your copy, or you can order it from our bookshop.org store. So, ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for joining us. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you. We adore you. We adore you.
Good night, y'all.
We adore you back. Good night. All right, everyone out there, make sure to stay tuned. We have a very special after show that you are not going to want to miss. We are going to be welcoming the amazing Brenda Janowitz. And don't forget that you can find all of our back episodes on YouTube. We are live there every week, just like we are on Facebook. And if you subscribe, you won't miss a thing. Plus, you'll have access to special short clips. And be sure to come back next week, same time, same place, as we welcome Jane Allen.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.
Hello, ladies. Wow, what a show.
Yeah.
What great guests they were.
I mean, when
I
you
just
started
adore
talking
them.
about it's time for announcements, I was like, no.
I know, much more to
There's
say.
no way an hour
I
went
know.
by.
I know.
No way an hour went by.
I know. Well, the good news is it isn't over yet. And we are so excited to welcome Brenda Janowitz. She is the author of 6 novels, and her 7th novel, The Liz Taylor Ring, was just released on February 1st.
She is the former books correspondent for Pop Sugar, and her work has also appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Real Simple, USA Today, Bustle, Writer's Digest. She's amazing. She attended Cornell University and Hofstra Law School. Wait, who is teaches at Hofstra Law School? Doesn't Alifair teach there now?
I don't know, but I was thinking of all the ways that like we could mispronounce
That's
that.
Hofstra Law School. Yep. Anyway, after graduate, I didn't though. I didn't. So
you nailed it. I was like, yeah, Patty, get it.
Well done.
Boom. So after graduation, she worked for the law firm K. Scholar LLP and did a federal clerkship with the Honorable Marilyn Dolan Go, United States Magistrate Judge for the Eastern District of New York. That's literally the longest title of any.
Are you trying to ask for a long title when we do our magazine masthead? Is that what that's about?
I want the word honorable in front of it.
She doesn't want just P. She needs like a long title.
I need
The
at
honorable
least.
P.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
honorable.
The honor-
P. All right, Sean, let's bring in the honorable Brenda.
Hi guys. That was quite an intro. I like it. Very impressive. And Judge Go would love that you were so excited.
That
about
would
the
be
title.
so much easier to say, Judge Go. Come on.
Yes, that's awesome. What a name. That's amazing.
Brenda, we're so happy you're here.
We're so excited.
Thanks for
And
having me.
Brenda, you and I have known each other for like 5 million years, have we not?
Yes.
All the way back in
Literally.
the Media Bistro days.
Literally 5 million. I mean, it's
we both have good skincare, but it's been 5 million.
well, let's put it this way. When we first met, we were both single, running around our
Yes.
various cities.
Oh my God.
And now we're both married with kids and mortgages.
Mortgages,
car
what's
payments.
happened?
And mortgages.
Exactly.
That's the big one. Yeah.
It's so true. Well, Brenda, we are so happy that you're here tonight. Can you kick things
Thank
off
you.
by telling us about the Liz Taylor ring?
I would love to. I even have my copy right here.
Perfect.
Thank you for having me. So the Liz Taylor ring is the story of 3 siblings, their parents' epic love story, and the one diamond ring that was thought to be long lost, but soon gets discovered, sending the entire family into upheaval. It's a family drama. It's really about the bonds of siblings, but it's also about the nature of family story and sort of how these stories morph as they go through the generations and as different people tell them. So it has something for everyone, especially people who like big diamonds, which the cover.
And
has
who doesn't? I
one.
mean,
And-
come on.
Well, my mom, when I was working on it, she likes to get me a little memento for the books. So she called me and she was like, how big was the crop? But she knew that the character in the book, I like to joke, Elizabeth Taylor's crop diamond was 33.19 carats, but my character had like a normal humongous diamond, like for a normal person. So in the book, it's an 11 carat stone. So she went and she got a crop replica, but it's 11 carats.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Because
cool.
So
people
great.
keep saying, do you have a real? I'm like, a real 11 carat stone? No, I don't have one.
No, I have kids and a mortgage.
Also,
Exactly.
please don't come rob me. I mean, are you asking for that?
I know, right?
Yeah, everyone keeps saying you should tell people it's real, and I'm like, I will be murdered over this.
Okay.
No.
There goes my finger. How
It's
can you
super
even
fake.
wear a 33 carat time? Like,
Well, if you're Elizabeth Taylor, you wear that every day of your life. And I like to joke, like, did she wear it to the supermarket? But Elizabeth Taylor didn't go to the supermarket. She was like on a yacht. So she wore it
I
day
would
to day.
probably find a way to wear it. I mean, I'm just being honest.
I would definitely find a way to wear it, but I just like every day. How do you? I mean,
Would
I'm
you
just trying to
struggle
imagine
to
how big that is.
The struggle would be really.
Humongous.
Yes, I would get it snagged on things, I think. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah,
Like, it would
yeah.
get snagged on my
And you could
clothes.
never wear gloves,
Yeah.
It would be.
Gloves are out.
Gloves are out. Okay. I want to talk about this. In one of the opening lines of the novel, you write, more than one thing can be true at once. It's such a poignant
It's so
and
good.
true thing to say. Sometimes when I talk about that concept, I'll say it doesn't always have to be either or. Sometimes it can be and both.
Yep.
So I want you to talk to us a little bit about how that relates to the story you told.
Yeah, whenever I'm working on a book, I find I'm learning something about myself and sort of
Yeah.
how I interact with the world.
Mhm.
And I think over the years, what I've realized, I'm kind of like very black and white about things, and it's hard for me to see the shades of gray. And especially through this strange time we're living in, it's important to see the shades of gray, and it's important to realize, there's lots of different opinions and lots of different people, and you get it. Like there's shades of gray, and you have to
There's
sort of
and
acknowledge
so.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was working on this, one of the things that was important to me in sort of thinking about this idea of family myths was who's actually right. Like as parents, I think a lot of times we're like, there's this story and then there's the truth. But I was sort of like, what if everything was true? Because I think in life, everything sort of is true. And so that was sort of what I was exploring and the idea I was thinking about. And especially when it comes to family lore. Right? It's like everything's true. In fact, I'm working on a piece right now for Real Simple about an heirloom that was passed through my husband's family. So I started writing this story with the knowledge that I had when I was first told the story 14 years ago when I first met my husband. And, the first time I heard this story. So I wrote it up. But whenever I'm doing an essay that's about my husband or family, I'm not trying to get divorced over a byline. So I let him read it.
Don't divorce over a book, right?
No.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah. So I had him read a copy, but I also had my mother-in-law read a copy because it's her father's ring that I'm writing about. And they both had very different ideas about what had actually happened.
Wow.
And I said, well, I based this on what I was told the first time I was told the story. And then my mother-in-law called, she had her own little thing. And then my husband had, and some of these ideas sort of weren't the same. So I ended up writing the piece just from my perspective because I'm telling the story. This is the story as I was told. Needless to say, I'm sure this has happened to all of you. The word count got cut down, so it didn't matter anyway. So I ended up telling like a much more pure version of the story. So it was fine, but it was just very interesting that I had been told the story. I'd been told it over the years. Both of Doug's sisters had told me different versions. And Doug, that's not right. It was fascinating. And that's sort of what I'm exploring in the book. Just this idea of how the same people can be telling the same story and they lived it at the same time. And it's somewhat different.
It's funny that you say that. There was something that like kind of interests me that's sort of in my family history. And when I started going to like dig into it, I mean, I'm not writing a book about it, but I thought it'd be an interesting basis for a book. And I went to go dig into it and I called someone in my family and said, can you send me like these pictures or whatever? And they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, remember? And you showed me, and they were like, oh yeah, I did show you pictures, but it was of this, not this. And I'm like, how can I remember that so incorrectly?
So wrongly.
But it's so true how our memories just like play tricks on us. It's very bizarre.
It's
very
like a game of telephone. Yeah.
With each, they say, because when I was doing my research for The Favorite Daughter about memory, each time we narrate a story about ourselves or our family, it shifts a little here, a little there.
Does.
And then that narration becomes something completely new.
Yeah.
And so it's the same memory, but narrated differently. That's great.
Such a good point. What a fascinating thing to explore in a book. I love that.
Back to your quote, it can all be true at once.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting, especially, in something like this, like sibling stories and things where everyone remembers it a little bit differently. And, how you open the book and it's like, all of these different threads and this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. It was just really interesting to me. But so you mentioned this, but at the heart of this book is what these three siblings at the center of the story describe as their parents' epic love story. And we know there's kind of the ring connection with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, but no spoil, like don't give anything away, but did you parallel their love story in any other ways in this book?
That's a tricky question. When I decided I was going to use the love story of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, I mostly wanted to just use the idea of it.
Right.
And also when you speak to people, like when I spoke to my mother about it, my aunt, different people who sort of lived in that time when it was happening, they had different ideas about what had happened. So I just wanted this idea of an epic love story that where you couldn't forget about the other person, even if you were no longer with that person, they were just sort of in your life, that you were thinking of that person on their deathbed. That was really the main inspiration. Once I started doing my research, it got more interesting. Once I learned more about their whole love affair, it became more and more fascinating. So what I did was I didn't parallel the relationship, but I took nuggets from here or there, and I just sort of infused the book with it. So if you're a Liz Taylor lover and you really know her life story, you'll see little nuggets. Like I mentioned the yacht before. Yeah. They famously lived on a yacht at one point in time, which I didn't know. So of course I have my characters go to a party on a yacht. There's just like little things here or there. But the book is very much a love letter to Elizabeth Taylor. So some of the parts of the relationship that maybe were a little rougher, I didn't actually want to include. I was definitely very choosy. And since it's not biographical fiction, it's really just fiction that's inspired. I was able to sort of pick and choose the good stuff, or the things that interest me, I should say. And then there were certain things in the relationship where I just sort of made it happen a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Brenda, one of the things I like so much about you, like just again, having known you for so long and followed your work for years, is that when you're so good at writing these essays that take us on a little journey, right? Because in an essay you only have so much space, but then give us something really to take away, to sink our teeth into and take away at the end. Can you tell us what you want us to take away from this? This sweeping book that's much longer than an essay, but you always have just this this nugget of wisdom. What's the nugget of wisdom you want us to take from this story?
Thank you. I feel like the nugget is just this idea of family story and how it's passed down. Yeah. That's really what I want people talking about when they sort of finish the book. There's a lot more, like you said, there's a lot more there, and I tackle a lot of other things, but for me, the book is really about the nature of story. And that's sort of what I was obsessed with when I was writing it. And that's what I sort of want to keep talking about. And I get really excited when people sort of like mention it. Like Jen Weiner just did a Facebook Live, and she said that was her favorite part. And I was like listening with my headphones, screaming at my husband. I'm like, Jen gets it. He's like, who are you talking about? I'm like on my phone.
No, that's the best though, when like someone gets that thing that you were trying to do, and it was like subtle, but you're like really hoping that someone gets it. You're like, yes.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. Sometimes someone will read their book and they'll explain it to you. They're like, what was interesting about your book? And you're like, oh, really? Oh, cool. Thanks.
Is that an interesting part?
Put it there.
That thing I spent 3 years on that I did research on.
Yeah, no, that's not intentional. Yeah.
It just happens to be there. So, I mean, I think that's the main thing. But I feel like also if you want to read it just for the love story or things like that, that's fine. If you just like sibling drama, that's fine too. If you'd like to gamble and you want to read some scenes about gambling, that's cool too.
Or Brenda, if you like all of those things.
Exactly.
Who doesn't?
Exactly. But you have to like diamonds. You have to like diamonds. At one point when I was working on
diamonds?
this. Well, at one point I was working on this and I posted a picture of Liz Taylor with the crop, and someone who I won't out her here, but she said, oh, it's just so disgusting. It's so humongous. And I was like, what? Disgustingly amazing? Is that what you mean?
Disgustingly awesome? Yeah.
I'm going to go find that post and be like, can you imagine how hard it was for her to wear gloves?
Can you imagine when she put on a sweater?
Yeah.
And then
the struggles she faced.
Struggles of the crop. You could have called it the struggles of the crop.
Equally catchy.
I'm gonna file that for.
You're really coming up with some good titles tonight, Patty. Okay, Brenda. This is sort of like when you have a baby and you're holding it like this, and everyone's like, "When are you having the next one?" So I don't know if you can tell us anything, but can you give us any little hints about if you're working on something new?
I can. And also, interestingly enough, when I had my first son, I was totally like, I'm having my next child very soon. I never have a problem with that question, even in real life.
Awesome.
So I'm working on novel number 8, and it's called The Audrey Hepburn Estate.
Oh my God.
Yes. So I'm taking heavy inspiration from the movie Sabrina, I don't know
I
if you
love
guys
that
are familiar with
movie.
that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to have a love triangle, but that movie took place, well, it was supposed to have taken place Glen Cove, Long Island. And when I was working on the Liz Taylor Ring, one of the things, a lot of the book takes place on Long Island, where I'm from and where my editor is from. And one of her notes early on was, we need more Long Island glamour. And I think she meant it as like a throwaway line, but I have not stopped saying Long Island glamour for like 2 years now.
I love that. I love that.
I'm just obsessed with this idea of like Long Island glamour. So needless to say, the Audrey Hepburn estate will have lots of Long Island glamour because we've got the Glen Cove setting, which is a very fancy place, perfect for Audrey Hepburn. So love triangle, Long Island glamour, we've got it all.
Got it all.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that sounds amazing. Well, Brenda, we could talk to you all night. I hate that we don't have more time, but before we leave you, can you tell all of our viewers out there where they can find you online?
Oh my goodness, everywhere. My website is just brendajanowitz.com. On Instagram, I'm Brenda Janowitz Writer. On Facebook, just plain old Brenda Janowitz. And Twitter, also plain old Brenda Janowitz. But I'm pretty findable. I feel like I'm everywhere online and commenting and all that good stuff. So if you find me online, give a shout. I'll give a shout back.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brenda. And everyone, don't forget that you can pick up your copy of the Liz Taylor Ring in our Friends and Fiction Bookshop.org shop or wherever books are sold. Thank you again for joining us, Brenda. And thanks to all of you out there for spending your Wednesday with us. We always love seeing you.
Bye, Brenda.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night.